It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not even about us. It's about legacy. It's about what we choose to leave behind for future generations. And that's why, for the next year, and for the first time since 1974, the best and brightest men and women of nations and corporations the world over will pool their resources, share their collective vision to leave behind a brighter future. It's not about us. Therefore, what I'm saying, if I'm saying anything, is welcome back.
The work of a single organization, the Syndicate. A rogue nation, trained to do what we do, imbued with a new sense of purpose.
The Syndicate, you say?
Yes, sir. That's what he calls it.
There was quite a bit of similarity between me and the Cheyenne character. Number one, I'd been carrying a gun and a badge for about 4 years before I did Cheyenne, so when I had to wear a gun and a badge, I felt right at home with it. It seemed pretty natural. I had a lot of different jobs because I hadn't really found what I wanted to do, and most of the jobs that I took, was to pay the rent and put food on the table and take care of the family. During the Second World War, it was either go in the Army or join the Merchant Marine, and I'd already worked on the river boats during the summer somewhat as a deckhand. So I went on and worked on the Great Lakes, on the oil ships, and I got my saltwater papers, and we were taking loads of grain to North Africa and going up to the Aleutian Islands, taking stuff up there. And I spent a while in Texas with a buddy of mine that I was in the Merchant Marine with in Brownwood, Texas. By then I was married. I had a daughter, Valerie. And then decided to go to California, drove out there and got a job working as a carpenter, didn't like it too well. And I went from that to into security work, watching the longshoremen and merchandise and all that for 8 hours, come home, clean up, and then I'd go work as a bouncer in the nightclubs for 6 hours. Didn't leave a whole lot of time for anything else. And then I finally heard that it paid a lot better in Las Vegas, and I drove up there. I went to see the sheriff, and he said, well, I hate to tell you, he said, you got to live here for 6 months before you can get a job as a deputy. And he said, Mr. Francis is going to be head of the security at the new Sands Hotel. They got about a month before they open, and he'd like to hire you. He said, can you go to work tomorrow morning? So that's what I did. Later in the year, maybe 7, 8 months later, Van Johnson was there, and he said, look, I don't know if you're interested or not, but there's one of Hollywood's biggest agents here, and he'd like to talk to you. Would you be interested? And we talked, and I guess I didn't seem too excited about it. He gave me his card, said, you'd have to come to Hollywood, of course. He said, if you decide to do that, look me up. Can't promise you anything. We'll see what we can do. The thought occurred to me, you know, I'm not going to get that far carrying a gun and a badge. It doesn't pay all that well. If you make movies, you can make some pretty good money. Plus the bullets aren't real, and if I got to play the hero, I get to win all the time. So anyhow, I went down, tried my luck. It took 1.5 years to get a break, and oddly enough, it didn't really come through the agent. Happened to meet an old-timer on the street, and he told me, he said, you know, the 10 Commandments are looking for big guys like you. If you want to give me your phone number, I'll see if I can set up an interview. And I didn't really think that he could, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I gave him my phone number and forgot about it. About 2 weeks later, I get a call, and he had set up an interview with Henry Wilcoxon, who he set up an appointment for me to meet DeMille. And the day I was supposed to meet DeMille, I was coming in from North Hollywood and got on the freeway, and I noticed an elderly lady trying to change a tire on her car, and I could tell that she was having a tough time doing it. So I stopped and I changed the tire for her, and she said, what do I owe you? And I said, you don't owe me anything, man. And she said, well, I hope I haven't made you late for anything. I said, well, I have an appointment at Paramount Studios, but I'm sure it'll be all right. And I got there, and I was a little late. And when I came in to meet DeMille, I'll never forget, he said, you're late, young man. And I thought, uh-oh, my career has ended before it begins. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, I stopped to help somebody on the freeway. He said, yes, I know all about that. It just so happens that was my secretary. So I got a reprieve there. But he did give me the part of the captain of the Sardinian Guard, because I'm blue-eyed, and the Sardinian Guard evidently did have blue eyes. It was an excellent opportunity for me to watch the real pros, the big-timers. It was very excited for me. I was very much in awe of those people, and yet I learned they do make mistakes, so I thought maybe there's hope for me. From that, Henry Wilcoxon had arranged for me to take a couple of screen tests. Then Hal Wallace saw the screen test, put me under contract for 6 months. I didn't do anything for him. A month and a half later, Warner's had saw the screen test and bought the contract from Hal Wallace. So I wind up over at Warner's, and then they were in preparation to make Cheyenne, the first venture into TV. I had to audition 2 separate days for Cheyenne with all the other leading men there in Hollywood. And the first one, I thought, you know, I don't stand a chance in the world. These guys, you know, they have experience, blah, blah, blah. And so the second day, I just had fun with it. I figured I'm not going to get it anyway, so I just had fun with it, and that's the secret, is to have fun with it and be yourself and relax. And Jack Warner decided that I would do Cheyenne, and from there we started doing them.
This here is Cheyenne.
So you're Cheyenne Bodie.
The year 1983, a spaceship out of control.
What are you doing? We can't level off. I can't get back in orbit. Look for yourself. We don't have the reserve power.
Headed for oblivion. An oblivion in a nightmare environment. 7 people must learn to survive, to live a miniature existence in a land of fantastic proportions.
If you can create a distraction, I think I can climb up there. I'm gonna get out of here! From now on, that's just the way it's gonna be in this world.
Land of the Giants, in color.
I'm Jennifer George with Hollywood Exclusives. With me is Deanna Lund. Hi, Deanna.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, you look good.
Thank you. You do too.
So energetic and full of it.
Yeah, we have to be. So I was wondering, tell us about Land of the Giants, your experience on that show.
Well, there was a lot of them, but it was an interesting show. It was interesting sort of the way I came about getting the job. I had signed to do a film, Tony Rome, with Frank Sinatra, and I didn't read the fine print, and I actually did it because it was being shot in Florida, and I wanted to go home, which is where I lived in Daytona Beach. And so I did the film, and they apparently sent the dailies back to Fox, or they do that, I guess, traditionally. But anyway, Irwin Allen saw the dailies. He was looking for a star of Land of the Giants, and he cast me via the dailies. So I was notified. It was really a great gig because I never had to audition.
Yeah.
I went home, and I was unpacking and planning to stay there. And my agent calls and says, "You got a series?" And I said, "That's not funny." Yeah. Hung up on him. So he had to call about 6 times before I believed him, and came back. And I was back a couple of weeks, and I thought, I don't believe it. It was all a ruse to get me back. And then all of a sudden, Irwin Allen calls, and he said, he was very, very funny guy, but he was dead serious. He was dead serious funny, if you know what I mean. Would you mind coming in so I could meet my star? I've never even seen you in person. I said, oh, okay. I can tell this is going to be a little intimidating, but okay. Yeah, so actually we had a great relationship. Wow. Yeah.
And you've kind of lost your mojo a bit over the last year, you did?
Yeah, I had a very bad... I should have taken myself off the TV, but I didn't. And actually, I was going to the studio, coming home, staying home. I didn't actually... listen, there are worse things in the world, but I had health issues, and I had the depression, and I didn't realise. I always thought, get over yourself. And I should have known my mum died of it. But I thought it was something you could do. But it exists. And anybody out there who's suffering... Trust me, I didn't want to put one foot in front of the other outside the house. But for a couple of really good friends, David Williams was brilliant. He has kept me going. And a couple of other friends, Prem Merrill, who's not in the business. So I should have really said, I had a bad breakup, and then I had health issues, and I thought, you know what? I want to withdraw. But you know what this business is like?
You have to keep going, and if you don't work, you don't get paid. It comes down, it's as simple as that a lot of the time.
Well, fortunately, I've been quite sensible. So the money wasn't the main thing. It was letting people down who had the series going. So we did like 3 series of In It to Win It up until the last one, when people were going, what's wrong with him? He looks ill. And I didn't look great.
But Dale, to be going out and doing those happy game shows, and then you go back to your room or whatever and just feel bleak, that must have been a really
Never understood.
transition.
Anybody that had it, if you've never had it, you don't understand it. But if you've had it, oh my God, it really exists. And I thought, people going, come on, get out. And I didn't want people going, can we come out? And I would not leave the house. So 5 years.
So how have you recovered from it then, Dale?
I've totally got through it because I had health issues. It was triggered by a very bad breakup with a relationship. Right. God, I can't off-pick them bad.
Oh. You should be a loose woman, honestly.
The ones I like are never around, and I like people are amazed at my taste. I like them if they've got not a tooth in their head, big fat thing. If a man's got a beard and he's over 45, I'm there, tattoos. And listen,
I'm just scanning my audience.
Well, if they've got emotional problems, I can make that last for 10 years. I mean, seriously.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, we were having a chat earlier on about our dads and the effect that our dads had on us and whether or not that had an impact on the men that we chose in our lives. Why do you think you make these choices?
I think it's because, do you know, honestly, it's this very superficial thing to say. I think it's lust. It's who you fancy. You see someone, if you don't fancy them within a couple of dates, I don't think you ever will.
Yeah.
And yet people tell me that if you... Someone said, a girlfriend said to me the other week, she said, you know, I'm really happy now, and I didn't fancy him when I met him. They're married. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I persevered. She said, I persevered, and I realised it's time I went from trouble boys to nice guys.
The compromise moment.
I can't do the nice guys.
But kind of need to go out.
I can't do that. You know, I mean, if they're mean and nasty, and it, you know, a bit.
Love it. I dig it. I proper dig it.
Well, and we always got double dates. I'll pick one for you, although maybe you've already found one. I don't know. And you'll have to pick one for me.
Is he that fit? Is he, Dal?
And listen, I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to check my phone when I get off set, and if he has said I can. I mean, do you really want to meet someone new?
Well, is he nice?
She's on dating sites at the moment.
Yeah,
she's a good time.
But how do you do that? Because I can't go on. I don't do social media. There's no Facebook. There's no social media. There's no Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. I don't do any of them because no good comes of it. And it makes me laugh. All these people are... Yes, thank you. And you're going to think I'm a mean person here, but... There are about 12 people pretending to be me on Facebook.
There is.
And about 12 on Twitter. And I get some wry pleasure out of thinking some moron is writing to another moron who's pretending to be me. And you know what? They're so nasty.
Yeah. So would you not use dating sites? Because that seems
well, the trouble is, if you put your picture on there, with all due respect, I'm quite well known. So the minute you see the picture...
Yeah.
I mean, A, it's desperately unattractive to another gay man to find a guy in show business who's high profile. It's not good. It's not attractive. Oh. And I get that. Nobody wants a camp over 60-year-old man.
No. Who is beautiful and with the kindest heart. Don't be silly. Well, don't be silly, Dale. You're being silly.
You sound like my therapist.
Do you know, being on Loose Women, it is like having therapy. This is what
You've said that this morning.
Well, I watch it all the time, and I see you girls, I'm thinking... How great to have a show where the girls... And, of course, the audience... When I made that comment about social media, you were all with me because you understood what I meant. And I love that because debate... I've got myself into such trouble with my opinions lately.
Yeah.
Apparently on social media, I know they've said the most terrible things about me. I've been misquoted left, right and centre.
Yes.
But by not taking yourself into it, I don't see it. People tell me, did you hear what someone said? And one person wrote and said, he is a fat... talentless, shirt-lifting puff. Oh. And I went... And we see you're going... And I went, so?
Yeah.
I am a puff, I am a shirt... I mean...
But you're not talentless, you're fat.
No, but the thing is, it's like a very clever person once said to me, would you go out to the bus stop in the front of your house and ask somebody, what do you think of me?
Yeah.
And what do you think I'm doing? No, of course you wouldn't.
And also, as well, Dale, the whole thing with, you know, Twitter and all this sort of stuff, I had it recently and I was so tempted to tweet back to these people and say, look, I really don't mind you bitching about me, but can you do it the old-fashioned way and do it behind my back? You really don't need to include me on the conversation with
but you see, Andrea, today we live in a world where I'm sorry, but my other thing, now you're going to hate me. I can't be doing with this political correctness. It drives me nuts. And... Oh! Thank you. And
wait a minute, you don't know what he's going to say.
You can't say this, you can't say that. I'd rather have someone tell me what they think of me than think, oh, I can't call him that because it's politically incorrect.
Yeah.
No, and what happened to sticks and stones can break... Where's your spirit? Where's your... You've got to have that competition in you. You've got that chutzpah. It makes you strong. If everybody's equal and everybody's pussyfooting around...
Good afternoon. My guest today is Harlan Ellison. Welcome. You're not exactly a household name here yet, but with your new books coming out, you may be soon. So I will explain to viewers what your publicists have told me about you. You were born in Cleveland, Ohio. You've been a lumberjack, a fisherman, a crop picker, a hired gunman, a truck driver, a cook, a salesman, an actor, editor, writer of novels, short stories and screenplays, and apparently you're also a generalised all-round gadfly to the establishment. What's more, say your publicists, you're 5'5", blue-eyed, dark, and have an explosive personality, a devastating wit, and the sort of almost frightening articulacy, can't even say that word, that has made you a favourite guest on TV chat shows. Now, how would you see yourself?
I'd wonder how they omitted mentioning that I was responsible for World War II.
I'd like somebody to write that about me, but they wouldn't. Tell me how you see yourself.
Well, I see myself as a writer. I'm a professional liar.
Right, I won't go on to the professional line for a minute, but I will go on to writing. I would call you a science fiction writer. Now, is that exactly what you are?
No, that is exactly what I'm not. The problem is that it's one of those instances of something that waddles like a duck, quacks like a duck, sheds water like a duck, but isn't a duck. Really what I write is fantasy, contemporary fantasy, in the vein of, I don't know, John Collier or Roald Dahl. I take contemporary events and kind of look at them through the lens of fantasy and see what they really mean in mythic terms, which sounds terribly pompous, but it isn't. I just really tell stories.
Right, well then I've read your stories and I got very disturbed by them, and I like them very much. They have got a lot of violence in them.
There is a lot of violence in the world.
Now, you do describe things, though, sometimes in such a way that almost makes me squeamish.
Well, I'll tell you, I come from a tradition in America of the macho Western movie, you know, where John Wayne goes into a bar with 35 other people and they pound each other senseless for 2 hours, and at the end all he's got, you know, is a little mouse under his eye. And that isn't what violence is all about. Violence is painful, it's full of blood, it hurts people, it kills people, and I think when you lie about it, when you pretty it up, you lead people to believe that it's possible to go around shooting each other and punching each other and stabbing each other with impunity. And my stories are intended to have a very pronounced emotional effect on people. And so on occasion in a story, when it demands that, yes, I get very candid, very realistic. I did a story about Jack the Ripper. I've been fascinated by the Ripper for a long time, the way that he's become a myth, a legend. And when I wrote the story, I described in detail from the records one of his eviscerations of a woman. And it was roundly pilloried in America. I mean, people wrote me and said, I must be a Mau or some sort of terrible person to write this kind of thing. But it was the reality, and I wanted to explain the story was about the nature of evil, and I was trying to show that that's always comparative, and that something that seems incredibly evil in one period of time can be merely ludicrous in another.
But you know, you say your stories are not science fiction, but I would have defined them a little bit like that, because for one thing you set them in often a ruined world, a crumbled world. You often set them in a sort of way in our civilization, but you seem to be warning us that civilization is horrid, or it's beginning to be horrid, or that there are signs in us of some decay.
No, that's what I believe. I've spent a good deal of time in cities, in a number of countries, and they're all the same. Cities are basically dehumanizing. Cities are basically bestial. They turn people into animals. There's very little joy, very little light, and very little love. And I guess what some of my stories are saying is if you persist in cramming people like rats into a maze, they will inevitably go mad and chew each other to pieces. And in that way, I suppose they are cautionary tales.
Because you are an American, I did read your stories more as a criticism of America. I mean, maybe you are criticizing the world, but in specific terms, I think you sometimes are saying very cruel things or accurate things about America. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. Now here's the bicentennial year, and in America there is a feast of love about how wonderful America is. And no one bothers to mention the terrible and awful things that have been done in the name of patriotism and in the name of founding a country. I dare say the same things, apply to the English. But I think after a while, people get to praise themselves too much, and they lose sight of the fact that they have the same core of nastiness that everyone has.
Have you experienced violence yourself? I mean, directly. I mean, for instance, I read in your publicity that you have had several attempts or 2 attempts on your life.
Well, there were 2 bomb attempts on my life that came directly from a kind of political column that I was writing in America during the 60s and the early 70s, during the time of the two great thugs of our generation, Mr. Nixon and Mr. Agnew. I was never able to bring myself to call him President Nixon. It just wouldn't pass my lips. You know, my teeth would fall out. And a great many right-wingers got very annoyed at me, and they bombed the newspaper that I was writing for at one point and blew the rear end off it. And the interesting thing was that they had called me a half an hour earlier, pretending to be the police, saying that the bomb had already gone off, and would I mind going down there and watching the place until until other staff members could come and make sure no one stole the typewriters and so on. And I knew it was a put-on right from the get-go, and I said, I don't know who you are, but I'm having dinner, go away and leave me alone. And a half an hour later, the bomb went off, and if I had gone down, I'd have been blown up.
You told me that somebody tried to kill you with a gun.
Yeah, well, he was just a cuckoo.
Well, now tell me about it, though, because I was intrigued, because I've got a little question at the end of it.
Ah, okay. I know what the question is going to be, too, as a matter of fact. One day, I live in Los Angeles, and behind my home is about 12 acres of watershed land. And one day I was passing through the kitchen, and every time I passed the window, I would see a glint of light. And finally, I kind of looked out there, and I perceived that there was someone lying in the tall grass on a little plateau out behind the house. And I went and got a pair of binoculars that I have, and went into another room, and I looked, and here was a fellow lying out in the grass with a rifle aimed at my house. And I didn't know who he was, but I didn't think that was particularly friendly, so I went and found a gun that I keep in the house in a drawer, which is going to lead to your question, I'll bet you.
Maybe.
And, well, perhaps not. And I went out the front door and down the street, which is protected from the back so you can't see it, and I went all the way down and up through a gully and came up behind him and, all right, put down that rifle, I'll put a hole in your head. And down he put the rifle and took off his belt and tied up his hands behind his back and called the police, and they took him away. And he was a wacko case whom I'd met in New York some years before, and we'd been playing gin rummy, and I had cleaned him out, and he got angry at me. And he was going to come out and kill me then, but he got drafted and went to Vietnam and did 2 or 3 years there. The first thing he did when he got mustered out was to come across from New York to California and bought a rifle in Arizona, someplace like that, and found where I lived. It's not hard. I'm in the phone book. And he was ready to pot me.
I was going to ask you about your gun, but I'm going to ask you one other thing as well.
Mm.
What did you feel when you saw the man with your binoculars and decided to go round to him?
What did I feel? I have no idea. I just knew that it was a situation that should be tended to, that's all.
You had a gun.
Yes.
That is the other question I was going to ask you.
Yes.
Now, why do you own a gun?
I own a gun because, much as I would like to believe the world is a soft pink and white bunny rabbit story, it isn't. I deal with reality. I'm a pragmatist. I don't believe in Atlantis or flying saucers or astrology or Scientology or any of that nonsense. I believe that the world is as the world is, and one must deal with it as one finds it. And in America, there is an enormous amount of violence, random violence, over which there is no control. And occasionally people come around and they either want to rob your home or they want to cause you difficulty. And while I'm not the most prominent person in America, I have a rather high profile, and this has happened before. And I would be a bloody fool not to have something around that, in the crunch, I could not fall back upon. I don't like it. I must tell you, I don't like having a weapon in the house.
Your gun was loaded when you went up to that man?
Yes, the gun was loaded when I went up to
and
him.
would you have used it if he'd struggled?
If he had struggled? No, no, I probably would have bashed him in the face with a fist. I mean, the last thing I would do would be to shoot anyone. But if he had seen me coming and had turned around and started shooting at me, I suppose I would have dropped and taken good, careful aim and tried to knock him down. I don't think I'd have tried to kill him.
Here's a purer than thou thought coming from me now. If I lived in America, I think one of my greatest campaigns, if I could launch one, would be to say that guns should not be owned by private people.
I agree with you. I don't think they should even be owned by the police. I've gotten in trouble telling police that they should act like London bobbies and have a nightstick and not have a gun. I concur 100%.
But Harlan, I'd never hear of great movements in America saying this.
Well, oddly enough, there is a great movement, but there's an even greater movement for guns, and it has to do with something called the National Rifle Association, the NRA. They have an enormous lobby in Congress, and they are supported by the arms manufacturers, the munitions makers. And they have millions, I don't mean thousands, but millions of people who are members of the National Rifle Association. And these people, if a politician suddenly says we should not have guns, there will be 500,000 letters on that man's desk the next day. They will send, they've done publicity campaigns against politicians. They have defeated politicians who have been for gun control. And it's amazing that we have the small amount of gun control that we do have in America at this point, which has come about only because of terrible things like the assassination of Martin Luther King and the shooting of George Wallace. We have controls, we do have laws. It's just that guns are so easy to come by. I mean, there are states where they're manufactured and you can just ship them right across the border and nothing is done about it. Well, when I was a kid, I lived in Ohio, which most people think of as being the rational, sane heart of America, because it's right in the middle. And a great many notable people have come from Ohio, James Thurber and Milton Caniff, the cartoonist, and people like that. I lived in a town about 30 miles northeast of Cleveland, a very small town called Painesville. And I'm Jewish, and there were no other Jewish kids my age in the town, and I was constantly getting thumped. They used to knock on me like I was a door. I had to fight my way from school every day. And it was a very early education in the nature of bigotry and in the nature of hatred that has no rational background to it. And I fought ever since I was a child. And it was so bad that I had no friends. I had none whatsoever. I mean, when, you hear kids say, well, I had a miserable childhood and I didn't have any friends. But they always had one or two. I didn't have anybody. I was all alone, and it made me, I suppose, a cynical kid and a mean kid, and I got in a lot of trouble. And I've always fought back, and eventually I just ran away when I was 13, ran off and started living on the road. And that's why that long list of silly jobs that I held. I mean, when you're unemployed and unskilled, I sit before you a classic example of a self-made man, thereby demonstrating the horrors of unskilled labor.
Well, I was listening there with my mouth open practically, because I mean, why did your parents stay in that place if you were the only Jews there?
Well, circumstance, of course. I never found this out until my mother was on. My mother dies regularly. She's been dying for the last 10 years. She's about 82 years old. She keeps having these massive heart attacks that would kill a Tyrannosaurus. And one time, I keep her down in Miami, Florida, right? Where else would you keep a Jewish mother? Dorset, right? And I went to see her in the hospital in Miami Beach, and there she was with a tube up her nose and all. And she says, deathbed, I must tell you about your father. And my father died in '49 when I was still fairly young, and I never knew him very well because I was always on the road. I had run away a lot. And she began telling me the most wonderful and amazing things about how he had run booze during during Prohibition and had gone to jail for taking the rap for a guy who was also driving for him, who had 3 or 4 kids. I thought it was dynamite. I thought that was sensational. Why should she be ashamed of a thing like that? I mean, it was great. And so my dad had just gotten out of jail. And he went to work for my uncle in a jewelry store, and my uncle had the jewelry store in Painesville. And we didn't have the money to go anywhere else. I mean, he had no other place to go, and so I was stuck there. And I suppose an awful lot of the trouble was caused by the fact that I'm a big mouth. If I'd been a nice, quiet kid, and tugged my forelock a lot, I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten crushed so much. But then I probably wouldn't be writing the kinds of things I'm writing today.
When did you start to write the kind of things you're writing then?
Well, professionally, I've been writing for 20 years.
You've done Batman and Star Trek and Valley of the Dolls, all sorts of things, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I've written a lot of television in the last 15 years since I moved to Los Angeles. But I've been writing books for 22 years, books and stories. But the first thing I ever wrote and sold was when I was 10 years old. I sold a 5-part serial to the Cleveland News, to the young people's column. It was a direct steal from Sir Walter Scott. I mean, just dead on. And then I followed up with my second big success, which is a direct steal from Rider Haggard. And after that, I just kept right on writing. I've always written. No matter what else it was I was doing to earn a living, I was always writing.
Can you, in less than a minute, tell me about the story which I'm told is one of the best science fiction stories ever written, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream?
I will try. The background of the story is that the Third World War starts, and the 3 major powers, China, Russia and America, find that the war is so complex that they cannot handle it just with people trying to program it, and so they build giant computers to handle all of the tactics. And fearing that they'll be bombed, they sink them into the earth far down in caves. Eventually, the computers link up and they take over the world, program the war so that all human beings are killed. And the story is about the last 5 human beings that are brought down into the center of the earth, inside the belly of this giant computer that fills the earth, and it torments them.
You guys making music like that, it reminds me of a dithram, you know? That Greek thing where 50 guys get that naked and dance in a field. Yeah! You know what I mean?
Well, we don't have time for that, Tim. See, we only get an hour off for lunch.
Rock, what do you have for us?
Oh, well, Timmy, the guys and I have formed a band. I'll be playing the angle grinder and a 55-gallon drum.
Tim, I'm gonna be on the galvanized piping chimes and also on the anvil.
Tim, I'll be on the trash can, the gas cans, and the wrench. In fact, Tim, I am the entire rhythm section.
And Timmy, the lovely Janine is back to fill in the melody.
Janine, thank you for returning to the show. Why don't you sit right here? Oh, God, my body's quivering right now just thinking about this. People like this built together to build a band that plays with only tools. I guess, Al, we could call this heavy metal.
I don't think so, Tim. But I do find them riveting.
Hey, Timmy, you're gonna love this. We wrote this one just for you. We call it The Ratchet Rhapsody.
Well, making their television debut right here on Tool Time, K&B and the boys and Janine, rock, let's roll.
Pete!
That would be me. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. My mom and dad used to go and see this local singer in Dallas. Wherever he played, he had a group called the Big Beats. His name was Trini Lopez. My mom had said to Trini, if you ever need a drummer, give us a call, because our son's a drummer. And I wasn't really a drummer, I was trying. And so, sure enough, one night the phone rang, and it was Trini Lopez. He said, my drummer's sick, gonna be out for a couple of weeks. Can you sit in on, I have 2 weekends for you, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll come back to Dallas on Sunday so I could go back to school. So I got this little gig with Trini that was going to be 2 weekends. And I ended up with Trini for 8 years.
Let me pause you right there.
Okay.
This would be a good time to show a little clip.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the newest recording star, Trini Lopez.
platinum so fast that we're going to work at PJ's one night, and Trini's manager, Bullet Sturgum, who, by the way, had two brothers, Buckshot and BB. I swear to God, that's a true story. So we hired a little group called the Rolling Stones to open the show for us. Nobody had ever heard of them. They were brand new. We heard them play. I thought, they're okay. They can play a little blues, you know. They're nothing really to write home about, but they're okay. I don't know what kind of career they're going to have. And
you learned to pick them real early, huh?
Real quick, boy. We headlined the Olympia Theater in Paris for 8 weeks, and we hired this little group called the Beatles to open for us there. That picture was taken because Ringo asked if I would come and take a picture with them. So it was taken for them, not for me. And then I got up in the balcony when they were on stage, and this is...
But Frank Sinatra was a big part of that too.
Yeah.
Because you guys were playing the Cal Neva Lodge all the time.
4 years in a row, we spent all summer at the Cal Neva Lodge, and I had to sit on the side of the stage and watch the Rat Pack every single night. And he signed it to My Gal Fran with loves and kisses, Frank Sinatra. So my mom, she was higher than Roger Miller. I mean, she could have gone duck hunting with a rake, man.
Let's play another clip.
We got asked by the Hollywood USO if we would consider doing a tour of Vietnam in '66. And they wanted us for an in-depth tour, not for a week, but we were there for 4 months. And they said, would you like to take Anne Margaret with you? And we said, oh, okay, if we have to. So,
another chick singer.
So we took Anne Margaret with us.
I think that kid stayed up half the night playing those stupid games on his computer.
Right.
Excuse me? What do you mean, right?
Oh, Mom, come on. You're so naive.
Larry? Larry?
What?
Look at this. Look at this.
Oh, God.
Page after page after page of hardcore stuff. This is what he's been doing all night. Look at his history file. Look at how many sites he was at last night. He's 12 years old.
We knew this day was coming. We'll deal with it.
He hasn't even had his first kiss yet. This is not how I want my son to learn about
I
sex.
just don't want him to feel ashamed. That's all. It's natural to be curious about sex at his age.
Sex, yes. Porn, no.
Agreed. I will talk to him when he gets home from school. I will lay down the law. I will be very clear.
What are you gonna say?
I'll tell him that it's... I have no idea.
Teresa Banks.
What can I do for you?
Oh, Teresa. I really like your picture. You want a party?
Well, that sounds like fun. Where did you see my picture?
In Flesh World.
Okay. Come to the Red Diamond City Motel.
I'm coming from Twin Peaks.
Okay, if you're coming from Twin Peaks, it's just your side of Red Diamond City.
You'll be there?
I'll be here. Room 123.
As in ready, set, go?
Right. As in ready, set, go.
Oh, baby. Oh.
guy split. He split? Got the money. Looks like it's just us girls.
Hello, Roadhouse.
Jacques, it's Teresa.
Teresa. How you doing, eh?
I'm okay. Let me ask you a question. What does Ronette's father look like?
A short guy, heavy set, bald, eh? Why? What are you up to?
And what does Laura Palmer's father look like?
Very handsome. Hey, wavy black hair is like a movie star.
Well, I got JB to drive this guy up your way, and I had a thought about it, but now this guy was a big guy, about 6'4", nose broken like he was a boxer. Oh well. Okay, Jack, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hey, handsome. It's your little party girl.
They're writing songs of love, but not for me. A lucky stars above, but not for me. With love to lead the way, I've found more clouds of gray than any Russian play could guarantee. I was a fool to fall and get that way. Hi-ho, alas, and also lack-a-day. Although I can't dismiss the memory of her kiss, I guess she's not for me. You got me on the go, fascinating rhythm. I'm all a quiver. fascinating rhythm. The neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking just like a flitter. Each morning I get up with the sun to find at night no work has been done. I know that once it didn't matter, but now you're doing wrong when you start to batter. I'm so unhappy. Won't you take the day off, decide to roll along somewhere far away off and make it snappy? Oh, how I long to be the man I used to be. Fascinating rhythm, fascinating rhythm, fascinating rhythm. Stop picking on me. Stop picking on me. Stop picking on me. Stop picking on me. The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea, the memory of all that. No, no, they can't take that away from me. The way your smile just beams, the way you sing off key, the way you haunt my dreams. No, 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 they can't take that away from me. We may never meet again on that bumpy, bumpy road to love. Still I'll always, always keep a memory of the way you hold your knife, the way we danced till 3, the way you changed my life. No, 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 they can't take that away from me. No. Take that away. They can't take that away. The way you wear your hat, the memory of all that, the way you hold your knife, the way you changed my life.